I just said, this is a topic I've been thinking about quite a lot in the last almost 10 years, I would say. It was never like my primary focus, but it was always something that I was interested in. And it also we covered to some degree with our work in one or other context. So we would like to share, or I would like to share these learnings a little bit with you today, and also maybe inspire you to rethink yearly reviews or parts of them. I will talk about three things. One is an observation that we have, but others also have, that there seems to be a lot going on in the area of performance management, and we see that a lot of companies are moving away from traditional approaches. So we have a look at that. Then we look about what's happening next. Like, okay, we moved away from something. What do we do now? And there we also have some experiences, some observations that we'd like to share. And then the third thing is a very concrete example what we did at Creaholic. That also happened a little bit by accident, but I think it illustrates this change pretty well, and also allows me to give you a very concrete example that I know a lot about because I did it with colleagues here. And also if you have questions, then you can really ask any detailed question you want, and I can give you an answer, hopefully. So performance management in crisis. This is something that we have, that I have seen when I talked to people, but also there is a lot written about it, and I will show this in a second. But I will start with a personal story, because I had my own performance management crisis, let's say. When I worked at, a long time ago, in 2014, I joined a new company, and I had, I think I joined in June, and 3 months later I had my 3 months interview with my new boss, which was really positive, and everyone was really happy. And then I had my official annual review, and this was based on a very old school tool that I realized today is like, it was done in a bad way because I didn't understand many things. So for example, we had a very good dialogue. It was a really uplifting conversation. I felt really positive, and yeah, he likes me, he likes what I'm doing, and it's a very good, everything is going well. And then a few days later, I received an email from a tool and said, your performance evaluation is now complete or something. And then I clicked there, and I saw I got a rating 3 out of 5. I was like, hey, wait! I didn't know there was a rating. I didn't catch that in the interview, and this was really not in line with my feeling that I had after having talked to my boss. And interestingly, so there are many things that are interesting in there, because we had a very good discussion, but the process around it was very complicated, and I didn't even understand the process. He told me, my boss told me, you know how we do this. First we talk, then we make the tool happy. So basically we had the discussion based on how he liked to do the discussion, and then he clicked some stuff in the tool, and I was informed by email. And then I told him, yeah, like, okay, 3 out of 5, that doesn't represent what I understood in the meeting. And he told me, yeah, I mean, there's some things I think I've told you, but also it's very important to know that I can't give everyone a 5. I have to give more people a 3 and only a few people a 5, because it needs to be kind of a normal distribution. And I was like, okay, I get that, but is that realistic for a team of 5? I mean, if you have a company of 20,000, of course, you expect this distribution to be like that. But for a team of 5, it would be probably quite possible to have only 5s or only 4s. I think that's how it works. Like, good people attract good people, and then you have a team of good people. So I was unhappy with that. And then I didn't think about it so much, and then I started working on the topic, and then this evolved. And we'll come back to that in a second. Now, if you look a little bit, there are some good papers on this. For example, 𝗁𝗵𝗆 and 𝗃𝗏s in HBR in 2016 already wrote a very interesting paper on this. And they found that at the time, about a third of US companies have abandoned yearly reviews. So it's kind of a movement that happened also in very big companies like Deloitte, General Electric, Adobe, Microsoft. So it seems that the way this was done is not satisfying anymore. And if you look on the right, Deloitte also did an analysis of the numbers, and they calculate that they spent 1.8 million hours on the process. which is kind of, I mean, it's also a big company and stuff, but it's really like, this is a lot of time. So of course you ask the question, is it worth it? And then if you look in the middle, only 14% of employees strongly agree that performance reviews really inspire them to improve, right? And then you should ask, okay, what's the goal of this? And as maybe you have seen in the past when we talked about this, the goal of an employee survey is not to create a process, but to make it easier for people in the company to do a better job, because, you know, the collaboration works better, the work environment better fits what they need. And with these annual reviews, it's the same. I mean, the idea is, what can we do so that it's easier for employees to do a better job? Maybe we can think about development potential. Maybe we can do an evaluation of things that went well and didn't go well and what they could do to address this. And only 14% of employees really think that this happens. So something seems to be really off. And why is that? I mean, what's really interesting, and we show that on I show that on a later slide, is that the world of work has changed, and it just doesn't seem to fit this new world anymore. So very often the feedback is that these annual reviews only happen annually, and that's just not fast enough because the world changes very quickly. Then what happens also more and more, that the people who do it with you, they sometimes don't know you so well because they are officially your superior, but you don't collaborate with them anymore because you have matrix organizations or other types of organizations. I personally, I almost never had a superior that could actually judge my work, for example. And there's also a mindset problem, because if you focus on numbers and on evaluating people, you get from a I want to learn and improve mindset much more to an I have to prove that I did it well mindset. And it's a little bit like with incentives. If you give the wrong type of incentives, people just try to maximize the number, but not the thing that should be represented by the number. So for example, in school, if the incentive is you have to get a 6, they just try to find ways to get this good grade in school, but not to learn the stuff that will lead to the grade. They could also cheat, for example. And one extremely interesting study that I came across, because it was done by 2 former colleagues of mine, is that if you use rankings, like you compare people to each other, then you can have really interesting effects. So they did a beautiful study where they created kind of teams, like groups of 4 people, and each person got some money 10 times in a row, and they had to invest that money. Either they could keep it, they could invest it in a personal project or in a group project. And if they invested in the personal project, then they got some return, and in a group project, they got another return. And there were 2 conditions. One condition was, if I invest in my own project, I'm financially better off. It's worse for the group, but it's better for me. And there was another condition where if I invested in my own project, I was actually financially worse off than investing in the group project. So there was absolutely no reason to invest in the own project. But then they gave feedback to those people. They said, okay, one group had feedback about personal performance, the other one had feedback about the team's performance, and the third one got ranking feedback. They just said, comparison to your other team members, here is how you rank. And when they did that, people didn't maximize the money, they just wanted to maximize the rank. So they were financially worse off. They made worse business decisions in that sense, just so that would be the first one in their group. And this is kind of crazy. It's like, because it really makes the whole thing absurd. So you achieve the opposite of what you want to achieve. And I think that's a very interesting thing if you think about how can we measure, how can we improve the performance of people. So the question is now, so what now? What's happening? What did these companies do when they moved on, and also what did we do in that sense? So what we really observe a lot, there's a lot of enthusiasm about, okay, now let's move away from these static evaluations once per year to something of a more ongoing dialogue. I know some companies who do that to some degree, to some extent. They are very cautious with that. They have always the fear that, oh no, if we ask people to do that too often, then they feel it's not efficient. But that's what's basically happening. And the reason is because the world of work has changed, right? Like how we do work today is really different from how we did it 50, 60, 70 years ago. So basically, the world has become faster. So things change more often, and there is a need to adapt to this more often. We also see that with employee surveys, where having a survey every 3 years, every 2 years, or maybe even once a year doesn't seem fast enough now. The other thing is that we work more and more in teams. And so the outcome or the output or the performance of a single person is much more difficult to measure now, because it's very often a team output, right? Then also what we produce is moving a lot to knowledge work, which is much more difficult to evaluate than maybe it was before. I think it was always difficult depending on what you do, but maybe we have a more accentuated phenomenon here now. And the last one is that we also move towards a more distributed leadership. I said before, very often your boss can't even judge what you did because you are too removed from him or from her, and that also makes that more problematic. And that's exactly also what we observed at Creaholic. When I go in the example, I will tell you how that affected actually the whole process. So one thing is, okay, we have to do it more faster and more adapted to the work. And then the question is, okay, but is this still efficient, and how should they do this? And we've made an observation that's kind of interesting. And I think people underestimate the danger of not getting feedback, basically, right? So if you probably also have observed that in your collaboration, it also works very well with your spouse, actually. So you can also think about your personal relationships here. What happens is if you come together, you're perfectly aligned. You start something new, a new project, new collaboration. It's like, okay, you talk about stuff, you really try to understand each other and try to start working. And then what happens is every one of these two people or more people, they learn things and make decisions along the way. And doing this moves them away out of this efficient collaboration zone, because it makes perfect sense what they did to them, but the other one doesn't know about it. So they kind of move away. So for example, in a partnership, you could, I don't know, start thinking about doing a hobby and then doing this hobby and doing it more and then changing your way of looking at things and evaluating the value of stuff. And then all of a sudden you have different values, but your spouse never learned about it because he or she wasn't part of this. And this is also what we see very often in collaboration. And what usually then happens, there's a crash. Something happens and they become aware that they're out of touch. And unfortunately, in partnerships or in relationships, then sometimes they think, hey, this is not the person I married. It doesn't work anymore. But it wasn't necessary to get there. You could just have aligned more frequently, and then you would have done this evolution together. So what we also see, I mean, this is less dramatic, of course, in your work environment, but we see that these crashes are very, very dangerous and also very costly to fix. You need a lot of discussions and a lot of emotions involved, and it needs a lot of time to fix it, to realign. And then you realign, and then the same game starts again. So if you do this in a smarter way and say, okay, let's just fix points during the year where we do this alignment, even if you don't think it's necessary because you underestimate how much you have moved away already from each other, then you can prevent those inefficiencies and the crashes. And that's, for example, what I think is very helpful in general with collaboration, with team collaboration, but also in terms of the whole performance management thing, because you can, if you have like check-ins every 3 or 4 months with your employees, then you can learn where they stand, what their hopes and fears are, how they want to develop, how happy they are with the goal attainment, and so on. So it really allows for staying in the efficient collaboration zone much more. And it's not work. It's not kind of, it's not a crazy process, not 1.8 million hours. It's just talking to each other a little bit more frequently. And this is exactly what we did at Creaholic. To give you a little bit of context, Creaholic is a company that's full of professional inventors, we call ourselves. So people, we are an innovation agency, about 40 to 50 people who help companies to create innovations. We create innovations also with them, or we help them create an innovation culture. So these are people who are creative, sometimes a little bit chaotic. Processes and rules work a little less well in this environment. So, and what's really important is very hard to measure performance in this kind of environment. And we had a setup where we did a very traditional approach at the time, and we found out that this kind of caused problems at the company. And also it wasn't 1.8 billion hours, but it still took some time. It was very old-fashioned with the Word document, and we thought, can't we do that better? And I think the biggest problem, let's go through this now. So we said, okay, can we change our annual interview that was done in the classic style to something that's a little bit more modern and that helps people, we say, become the best version of themselves? So really focus on the development part of it and not on so much on the evaluation part of it. And what we did, we said, okay, let's move away from this 1 point time in the year thing to more continuous support, because we really think, as I showed before, that this is necessary. Then we had the problem that these traditional interviews were done with board members, 3 people, 1 of 3 people. And for almost everyone, the problem was, I never work with this person. I barely know, I mean, I see them sometimes in the office, but they don't know me, I don't know them. So we said, okay, that doesn't make sense. And in my own experience also I had that a lot. So let's try to match these people with other people that can really give them much more targeted feedback because they work together or they know them in one way or another. The third thing is that we had a very static interview questionnaire with smileys and stuff like that. And we try to move away from that and really make it more to the person that we're talking about. And also talk about topics that are relevant to them and not just go through a list of predefined questions. And what was very interesting, and I think you can never really get rid of it, but people had the impression that the assessment of their performance was unfair and superficial. And I think that was mainly driven by the fact that the person they had this interview with was too distant, but also in general, it was an uneasy feeling. So we tried to maximize the constructive and goal-oriented feedback. So instead of saying X did a good job in the past year, is like, these are his or her strengths. Here I see room for improvement. And let's have a look at the goals that have been defined, and let's define new goals so that we can have a more targeted evaluation of these things. And so how it works, like we decided, okay, everyone in the company has to choose a peer, can also be several peers. These peers can be anyone at the company, but we have some criteria for choosing peers, like somebody who knows you well, who you work with, or somebody who knows something that you would like to learn. For example, once I wanted, a long time ago, I wanted to learn more about leadership, and I had a colleague who had these skills, and I chose her as my peer. We don't work together, but I could still talk to her about these topics, and it was very instructive. And then the idea is that we have 3 points during the year that are kind of fixed, and we say, okay, please have a discussion of about 1 hour or longer if you wish with your peer in the winter, after around spring and after summer. And during these sessions, we have then materials where we have 2 key questions and some reflection questions and some materials to make it easy to prepare and to have the discussion. And then the people can go through these discussions and review the goals they have set and discuss the general situation. And in the annual session that you see at the top here, there you also have 1 person representing the company. So in that case, it was a managing partner who also brings in the perspective of the company, like what are the company goals, what's important for the company. We also have topics like salary in that sense. So the person might be more removed, but it's only one of the two people having the interview, so you have all the perspectives covered. And that's how we have been doing that for many years now. And I mean, there's still questions like who should be a peer? Can everyone be a peer or only some people? Do you need maybe trainings for peers and all these things? That's something that I think you can also develop and really adapt to your needs. But I think the key part here is that you have these discussions more regularly, that you tie them to certain goals. So for example, we have what and how goals. A what goal would be what do I do that helps the company? So for example, I do good sales, or I do projects that really make our customers happy. So they could define some goals there. And the how goal is, how do I want to develop myself? What do I want to learn? What are the skills I want to acquire in the next? And this is very specific, and we use OKRs, objectives and key results, also define this a little bit. And then we have very targeted discussions that feel personal, but they are still pretty, I would say, targeted for what we want to achieve. And I wanted to add something else, but I forgot. Exactly. Okay. Now, so what can you do today if you want to rethink your performance management or redo it? I think the easiest thing would be just have these feedback conversations more often. That is a very easy step. You don't need anything. If you can just start if you want. And then maybe you can do it on a company level. You can just do it with your people you work with. We also do it actually with, I mean, we for a long time, we didn't even have superiors in this company. Now we do. But we have this, like these peer sessions, they happen across these hierarchical boundaries, and they also happen sometimes more often than 3 times per year. Your peer is basically your sparring partner that goes with you through the year and helps you if you have a problem or an issue. Then very important is to focus on development, so less about judging how well or not well someone did. It's more like, okay, what do we see that could be improved and how do we get there? And also very important is the positive feedback. That's really a key driver of development. You have to feel that you're doing things well before you are ready to tackle the ones you don't do that well. Then exactly, I think I've shown that rankings can have serious problems, so I really wouldn't do them. You can ratings, I think that's debatable. You can use them. We do to some degree, but more as a basis for reflection and discussion, and not as a basis for evaluating and judging. And as I said, these what and how goals, I think this is something that has worked pretty well for us, because you make it really clear, okay, what are the things I want to focus on? And then you have regular times during the year to review them and say, okay, really, actually, I didn't even work on that goal, but maybe I should, or maybe it's not a priority. But just to have a more structured discussion about these topics. Yeah, that is what I wanted to share with you.